Hey guys, Tim Trich here, Ethernet Blueprint. Welcome to video number 6 of our 8-part series called Unifi for Newbies. Now this is probably the scariest video of them all because we're going to be doing firewall rules. Now, one of the things highlighted in this series is that a true benefit of using and putting together and spending a little more money on a unified network is because you can do VLANs and separate your traffic by creating like IoT networks and camera networks and your main default network and guest networks, okay? It's a true benefit of using this kind of system. But today's video is really where the rubber meets the road, because when putting together a system like this, if you're going to take the time to split up your traffic, you should also take the time to secure it. So that's what today's video is going to be all about, securing that network. Now, also in the series, we have built this test network and this foundation, this blueprint, if you will, of a network that you guys can use in your homes. This is the perfect starting point for anybody starting out. It can be added to, taken away from, based off of your situation, but it gives you that leg up so you guys can have a great system. So, I want to just take a quick minute to review what we've done so far, just in case you happen to stumble upon this video and are curious what the series is about, and then we're going to get on to the video. So, let's do a quick review. Okay guys, so if you're joining us for the first time, let's just review quick what the videos we've done so far and what we have lying ahead, because this is video number 6. Now in video number 1, we talk about who a Ubiquiti network is for. We talk about the components that make up a Ubiquiti network and how they kind of all plug together. This isn't a simple system where you just plug it into power and go. You kind of need to understand the pieces involved. And so that first video, we really dive into that and talk through it. And at the end of that video, I even give you some general equipment that I like to use in my builds just to sort of help you kind of get started with the process and so you can do your research. Now, video number 2 is all about the research. We actually go over to the Unifi store and we look at how to look up specifications on equipment, costs of equipment, so you guys can start piecing together your network. I wanted to just highlight a couple things in that video that will help you find the information you're looking for, and hopefully it does that. Now, video number 3 is where we kind of get started, right? We're going to build a network for you guys that you can follow along the process. So we actually get our equipment online, I introduce you to what it is, and I show you 2 different ways that you can actually bring that equipment online. Video number 4, we make some VLANs. Okay, so we're making VLANs, we're making Wi-Fi networks, and I'm showing you how to assign a VLAN to a switch, all wrapped up in one video. Now, video number 5, I dedicate to the guest network, and some of you may or may not use a guest network or want one, and that's okay. But I figured that Ubiquiti does enough things different that it deserved its own video, so we dedicate video number 5 to the guest network. Now, video number 6 is today's video, and we're going to be doing firewall rules. We're going to take everything we've built, and I'm going to show you step by step how to secure it, what the firewall rules mean. We're going to talk through every one. This is not going to be a fast video where we skim over information. We're going to try and really slow down and cover everything so you guys have a good understanding of what you're implementing. I want you to kind of walk away feeling like you understand this better. So this might be a little longer video as we talk through it. I don't know. I just started recording it, but look, we're going to kind of have to see. Now, videos number 7 and 8 are going to be dedicated 100% to Unifi Protect camera systems. So we're going to bring some cameras online, or at least a camera, and we're going to go through some of the global settings and how to incorporate Unifi Protect into your network. And because of that, we actually created a camera VLAN that we're going to be securing as part of today's video. Again, like I mentioned earlier, some of this stuff may apply to you and some of it may not. I've also included many helpful links along the way of other videos I've done to help you guys, find the information you're looking for. So hopefully this series is a great starting point for anybody who's just getting started in this world, this Ubiquiti ecosystem, if you will. So that's what we're here to do. We're here to help. So let's go ahead and get started with the firewall rules. I'm going to paint the picture of what we're going to be doing. I'm going to show you some documentation that you can actually download right from the description and take it with you, so you always have it. You don't have to go find this video to get it. I'm trying to really handhold this for you guys so you guys are successful in your network. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, guys, so before we get into the how, let's talk about the why. Why do we care? Why do we care about making VLANs in our house and using firewall rules and going to all this trouble that I'm doing in this video? Now, probably the simplest way for me to answer this is to give you some examples. So if you are the type of person who just wants to use your ISP router, or maybe you went to Best Buy or Amazon and got yourself a nice mesh system or a nicer, beefier gaming router, something like that, typically, and I can't speak for all systems out there, but typically those routers just make what we call a flat network. Basically, you create one or two SSIDs or wireless networks, whatever you have plugged in, and everything can talk to everything. You're on the same plane when it comes to your network, okay? And that makes your life simpler. It just does, right? Grabbing your cell phone to talk to a device on your network and run something from your phone, it's just a lot simpler in a flat network. There's nothing to get in the way. As long as that device is connected to the network and it's powered on, you should be able to control it, okay? And so a lot of people are really attracted to that. They like the easiness. They don't want to go to all this trouble. However, on the flip side, you could be leaving yourself open to attacks. Now, I don't want to scare anybody here. That's not what this video is about. It's really just meant to try to educate, right? So in general, IoT devices are considered less secure, okay? They just aren't pushing out firmware updates all the time. They're not trying to patch holes. They build them for convenience. They're sold very inexpensively to us to make our lives easier, so we can use our voice to order pizza from your kitchen. You know, I mean, that's what they're designed to do. They aren't really designed to be super secure devices, okay? So that means they are potentially more susceptible to an attack or an intrusion. They have internet access, so they're just floating their information out to the internet and talking directly back to your home network. And then in our flat network scenario, they have access to everything. If the intruder gets in your network through one of these vulnerabilities, they're in your network. They can talk to everything because everything's on that same flat network. So I think that's really where the benefit of using a system like Unifi, or really there's a lot of them out there that do that, because it allows you to just do a couple simple things. You might be following this series not because you want cameras or guest networks or that. You just want two islands, my secure stuff and my IoT. I want my IoT separate from my home network so I don't have to worry about some of these things. And that's what we're talking about here. That's why we're doing this, and that's why I think Ubiquiti specifically is sought out so often for a home network. Some of you guys, it probably seems like overkill, but for those of you out there that maybe have a lot of IoT devices and home assistants, and you got your phone that can control all these dumb devices that have direct access to the internet, it's just a step you need to take to kind of secure your network. So that's why we're here. That's what we're doing. Okay, we don't want your laptop to get attacked because, you know, you have a smart camera, you know, somewhere in your home, right? The goal is to protect you and your family, and hopefully this series will kind of make that possible for you. All right, guys, we're going to kick things off with an important firewall rule tip number 1, and that is get all your devices, your connected devices, in their assigned VLAN, and make sure you have full functionality before you start making your firewall rules. This really is designed to make sure that everything works before you start restricting things, because if something were to stop working, at least you know it's most likely due to a firewall rule. If it wasn't working prior to that, what broke it, right? And so you don't know if it's a firewall rule, you don't know if it's a device, you just don't know. And so it can make troubleshooting really tough. So make sure you get everything up and running first, and then we'll start adding the security. It'll save you a lot of time and headache, I promise. All right, guys, so let's meet the PDF that we're going to be using for the duration of this video. I think it's worth kind of going over what's in here and the format I used, so this is a usable document for you. I want this to be something that you can use on your own. And there's a link in the description for you to download and keep a copy for yourself so you can use it anytime you want and build from it and tweak it and do what you need to do to make it your own. This is just our starting point, and I think it's a good starting point. It covers a lot of the stuff that we're going to need, and I think it's going to be a great place for you guys to start in your network. So let's just kind of work our way down. So the top part here is just a summary of what we're setting up, just a general outline here. So let's go over that real quick. So we have our default network. This is our secure network, and this network will have full access to all the other VLANs. You can get anywhere in your network from this network, okay? It has full access. And what's really nice is if your traffic originates from the default network and is talking to another network, okay, IoT, camera, whatever, that network will be able to talk back to the default network, okay? Now, if the traffic is originating in the IoT VLAN, we're going to block that. We're going to restrict that. You can't talk from the IoT directly to the default network. However, if you are running a light from your phone and that light's in the IoT network and your phone's in the default network, and you say turn on, you want the light to be able to turn on. That's part one. But part two, that light has to communicate back to the app that says I'm on, and it shows you the little symbol that shows you that it's on or whatever. So we want the traffic to be able to talk back, and I'm going to show you how that's done in the firewall rules. Okay, so we're gonna talk through that. All right, so next we got our IoT network. This is considered our less secure stuff. Okay, I listed a bunch of things that are deemed as smart devices. Typically, this is where you're going to throw a smart device. Okay, and this network is going to have internet access. It's going to be able to browse the web, get to where it needs to go, but cannot directly communicate with any other VLANs that you have set up. Okay, that's important. Okay, it can't establish that communication, but it can talk back if the default network is talking to it. All right, so our camera network is going to be set up very similarly to the IoT network. However, because we're talking about Unifi cameras here, and in the case of our example, the Unifi gateway is also our NVR. And so we need to set up our camera VLAN just a little bit different, our camera firewall rule, excuse me, just a little bit different so we don't break our camera system. And I'm going to show you what that looks like too. All right, then we have our guest network. We're not going to be touching anything for guest. If you watch video 5, we set up everything in the guest network then, and we just use the built-in rules that are part of Ubiquiti. And so we just checked the little check guest box or checkbox, and it made all the rules for us. So we don't have to do anything in there, and that's how we're going to leave that for this video. All right, so as we move down the sheet here, we're going to see something called profiles -IP groups or port groups. Okay, and so what this is, the way the rules work is that you can create a group, and you could be a group of IP addresses, or as you see down here, it can be a group of ports. Okay, and then what we can do is we can actually go make a single firewall rule, and it'll make that rule for all of the IPs or ports that we have listed here. So it gives you the ability to create a single rule and have it apply to lots of different IP addresses or lots of different ports. And it can be a deny rule or an allow rule, just depending on how it's set up. So we have some port groups set up that we're going to be doing as part of this, okay? And I tried to make it so that the name and the type and everything is just like it is in Ubiquiti, so you know exactly what to put in there, all right? So we're going to have a total of 7 IP groups that you're going to need to include as part of this. And we're going to create every single one of them in this video, and we're going to create them at the moment we need them. But if you wanted to, you could just go create them all up front. If you knew this is how you wanted your network set up, you could just go create them right up front. However, your situation may be a little bit different from my situation, okay? Especially when we get to talking about the cameras, okay? That's going to be kind of the kicker here, because my NVR is my UDM Pro. If your NVR is, say, a Cloud Key Plus, right, then your rule is going to look a little bit different. So I would encourage you kind of watch this all the way through, try to get a feel what we're doing here, and then go from there. But these are profile groups that we're going to create as we create our firewall rules. And then next we're going to go into the rules themselves. We're actually going to create firewall rules that, and I have them all listed out here one at a time. And again, what I tried to do is to list the title of each thing so it matches Ubiquiti. So if we actually pull up our rule here, and we're kind of jumping ahead here, but if we go into our rules here and I go say I want to create a rule, you can see type, name, source type, address group, okay? So when you're over here, it's type, name, action, source type, address, port group. So it matches all the way across. So this should make it very, very easy for you guys to mimic what we're doing here. And hopefully with the explanation we're adding, that this all makes sense to you and you can kind of tweak it to your needs. But we're going to create a total of 8 firewall rules as well, and they're all listed in here. Now, when we're all said and done, this is what it's going to look like. I wanted to give you a screenshot of the final copy, okay? And again, you might have some IP address changes in here, or maybe you change the name a little bit to suit your needs. That's fine. But this is literally what we're going to build right here, all in one screen, so you can kind of see it. And so I thought that was important to include in this as well. So if you guys are ready to get started, we're going to go over to the UDM now, and we're going to start creating some firewall rules, and I'm going to talk through this one at a time. Let's go. All right, guys, so let's head over to the Unifi controller. This is where we're going to be creating our firewall rules today. And I want to point out for this video, just in case you didn't watch any of the rest of them, our controller is being run on a UDM Pro. Okay, so our UDM Pro is serving multiple function in today's video. It's also going to be our camera NVR. It has a 8-port managed switch. It's our router gateway, and it is the host of our Unifi controller, which is how we interface and interact with our network. Okay, so we are on the network interface of our UDM Pro. All right, we have a couple devices connected, so we got some cameras, we got some APs. We really don't have much for clients, just my phone and my computer, okay? And we're gonna create some firewall rules today. Now, before we get started, it's important to note that by default, Ubiquiti, when you create VLANs, Ubiquiti allows everything to talk to everything, okay? So all your VLANs have wide open communication with each other, which is why that first firewall tip is so important. It's good to create your VLANs, get everything in their appropriate VLAN. Get your TVs on the IoT network and your Alexas and all that stuff. Get your work computer on the main VLAN. Get your cameras plugged in and get that VLAN assigned, all of which we've covered in this series. All right, get everything working, everything talking. And then we'll come in here and create the firewall rules, because by default, everything can talk to everything. And I'm going to prove that for you here just real quick, just to show you that's kind of where we're at right now. So we don't have any firewall rules created. We haven't done anything yet. My computer, for the sake of this, is actually on our restricted IoT VLAN. So that's where we're at. And I have my phone on the home network, okay? So I'm just going to show you right now that we can ping that no problem. So show you IP config. You can see my IP address is 192.168.2.214, okay? That's in that VLAN 2. And I'm going to ping 192.168.1.209, okay? And you can see I can ping that on the default network, no problem. So I don't have a big mass network to try pinging a bunch of things, but we can get from the IoT to the default network, no problem as it stands right now. Now, if I click over into my devices, I have this camera here, and you can see it's in the VLAN 3, 192.168.3.39. So let's go ahead and ping that real quick. If my computer would listen, there it goes. All right, so ping 192.168.3.39. And you can see we can ping from the restricted IoT VLAN to another restricted VLAN on our network, no problem. And if I was on the camera network, I could ping out too. Everything is just wide open right now, okay? Now, we're going to be creating a series of rules, a total of 8 rules that we're going to create, okay? And if we go over here to our little cheat sheet here, we'll go down to where our rules are. The first 4 rules are going to be LAN in rules. You can see right here, LAN in, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4. And LAN in rules are made when you need a VLAN to talk to another VLAN. That's the rule that allows or denies this traffic to happen, okay? So those are the rules we're going to start with. We're going to restrict VLAN to VLAN traffic, okay? Now, this also applies if you have a device inside a VLAN that you need to communicate with. And I have some examples here, but say you put your printer on the IoT network, okay? Just a printer, a single device with a single IP address, in the IoT network and you want to be able to print to it from a default network, okay, you can set a specific rule that allows that to happen, okay? But it's going to be a LAN in rule, all right? And then the second half of the rules are going to be LAN local rules, okay? LAN local rules will allow or restrict access from a VLAN to the router or controller itself, okay? So basically, if I go into my network here, let's just go quickly look over into our settings. I'll go into our networks and IoT network, right? So here's my IoT network. This is where we built it. And you can see that my gateway IP address is 2.1. In the camera for VLAN 3, it's 3.1. And the guest, it's 99.1. So usually that .1 address, okay? Especially if you leave the defaults. So 192.168.2.1. That is the IP address. That's the IP address of our router itself. Our router has an IP address that we can get to. And I'm going to show you. So if I come up here and I go to 192.168.2.1, for example, you can see I can get to my router. I can log into it as a local user, no problem. We do not want our devices in our IoT network and these restricted VLANs to be able to do this. Okay, if you have something get corrupted or attacked in some way, you don't want it to have direct access to your router. So we have to create LAN local rules to restrict that access. So the LAN local blocks traffic from the VLAN or device on a VLAN or whatever to the router itself. And you're going to see we're going to have to create some allow rules and deny rules to make this all work, okay? But those are the rules that we're going to do. And we're just going to take them one at a time, talk through them, and go through this very slowly, okay? All right, so the first rule we're going to create, rule number 1, we are going to allow established and related traffic. This rule allows a restricted VLAN, like IoT, camera, or guest, to communicate back to our secure VLAN. So we've kind of been beating this up a little bit, and I was saying that it's very important that this can talk back. This is the rule that allows that to happen. All right, so if we make, as long as the traffic originates from the secure VLAN. And I said from the secure VLAN, like you might have a couple of them, right? You might have this default network. You might have a couple other networks that you want that are secure and have access to everything. That's okay. So just understand you'd have to make this rule for each one of them, okay? We only have one, and that's the default network. So let's go ahead and create this rule. So we're going to go over here, and I'm going to X out of that. And we're going to come down to our settings. And we're going to go to security, and we're going to choose traffic and firewall rules right here. Now yours might look like this, so just make sure you click on advanced if they don't, if it looks like that. And we are going to be creating a LAN rule. So you can see there are a lot of different types of rules in here, okay? There is LAN rules like we're going to be making. There's internet rules. These are rules that allow devices from the outside world to communicate into your network, where VPN and some of that stuff comes into play. Here's our guest rules that were created when we checked that little box. This is what Ubiquiti created for us, so those are there for us to use. And you can look at all your rules, you can look at just your internet rules, you can look at whatever you want to look at, but we are going to be in the LAN section, LAN, LAN. All right, so let's go ahead and create this first rule. We're going to hit create entry. And then we get this prompted with this page right here. So it is a LAN in rule, so just double check that. We need to name it allow established and related traffic. So we'll go back over and do that. I want things to match, so I'm going to make sure that things are matching the PDF. You can name these whatever makes sense to you. So allow established and related traffic. All right. Now, I like to put the word allow or drop or deny or block, whatever, in my rule name so I know when I look at it, that's what that rule is supposed to be doing. It just helps me. If I just put established and related traffic, I have to remember that that was an allow rule. So I like to add the word allow or drop or deny or block into my description, into my name. So we want to accept this traffic, okay? Now, it is from any source to any destination. And I know that seems counterintuitive because we only want this to be from our default, but we're going to restrict access from the IoT back. So trust me, it'll be okay. All right, so we're going to leave it any, and then down here at the bottom here, we have this match state, okay? Match state. And so we have to come over into this area down here. This is grayed out. So we have to click manual. Now we can check these, and we want to check the established and related checkboxes and hit add rule. So all LAN in rules will be at the top. All LAN local rules will be at the bottom. So just kind of nice. If you look when we showed our little cheat sheet of what it's supposed to look like, that's how they were laid out. So we have that in there now. Okay, so I'm going to just switch to the LAN in rules here. So there you go. Established, allow established and related traffic. LAN in, allow anything, and then you can't see our match state over here, but it's there. All right, now real quick, just in case you mess up or you're troubleshooting and you need to delete a firewall rule, okay? That's the best way to troubleshoot. The way you do it, just show it to you right now, you hit manage here, and it allows you to check any one that you want to, and you can just hit remove, okay? So that's how you remove one. If I hit done and, whoops, did I delete it? Nope, it's right here. Sorry, it kind of blends in. You can see if I scroll to the bottom, there's no delete down at the bottom like sometimes you would expect to see. So the way you do it is with this manage button, and it's the same way it's done in the profiles. There's a manage button you can click so you can delete or add or tweak or whatever your profiles. So we'll say done. All right, so now we have our first rule. Let's see what our second one is. Rule number 2, drop all invalid traffic. This rule blocks all packets on the LAN that are not valid. So I don't have a great description of this, guys. Basically, it's your router looking for invalid traffic on the network that's communicating between your firewalls. Maybe a session didn't end that it was supposed to, and it's just going to inspect that traffic, and it's going to make sure that only valid traffic is going through, and it's going to drop everything else. If anybody has a better description of that they want to leave into the comments, by all means, we can all learn together, but I just call it drop invalid traffic. So we're going to go in. You can see it's a LAN in. It's a drop rule, so we're going to deny or drop. The actions drop. It's also any, so anything. It's looking anything. It's not matching a from or a destination, and we're going to just check the invalid checkbox in that match state. So let's go over there and do it real quick. So we're going to create an entry, LAN in, drop invalid traffic. All right, it's a drop rule. Any, we didn't change anything. Don't worry, we will be changing those here very soon. We're going to have to turn on the manual thing again and go to our match state, and we're going to check the box invalid. So it's just looking for any invalid traffic on the network, and it's going to go ahead and drop that for us. Okay, just more of a cleanup item. I don't even know that you need it, but I like to have it in there. The guys who taught me how to do this had it in theirs, and it makes sense to me. All right, let's go check out our next rule. So let's go back over to our sheet. So we're going to do rule number 3. All right, this is where we're going to get into some of the blocking or allowing. All right, so rule number 3, we're going to allow the default to all private IP addresses. This rule allows our default VLAN to be able to communicate with all other VLANs, and not just the ones we've created, but all other possible VLANs that ever could be created. We're going to basically say any private, which may not make sense to you if you're new to this, but any network ever that you could ever create on your UDM Pro or your whatever device you're programming this on, any possible one. It's basically giving the default network keys to the castle. It can talk to everything, okay? Now, here's an example. If you put your printer, like we mentioned earlier, in the IoT network, because they aren't usually very secure, devices on your default network should be able to print to that printer with this rule. And I say should because not all printers are created the same. Some of them communicate a little bit differently. They're trying to be smart printers these days, and they're kind of a pain in the butt. So, but in general, if you have an IP printer that's connected to the network, this rule should allow you to be able to print from the default network to the other to the secure unsecure network where the printer's at. I gave a second example. Cell phones on the default network should be able to communicate with smart devices on the IoT VLAN, again in most cases. Not all smart devices are created equal. There's a lot of Chinese knockoff versions that might communicate a little bit different, but at the end of the day, in general, this is the rule that allows the default network to talk to everything. So let's go create it. It's going to be a LAN in. We're going to call it allow default to IP networks, and it's going to be allow. We're actually going to choose a source, the network, which is default, and it's going to talk to a port group called private IP networks. So we have to create this. Guys, this is going to be our first profile group that we are going to create. So let's go take a look at that real quick up in our profile section. This is going to be private IP addresses, okay? The type is going to be an IPv4, and we are going to add in all of these networks right here. That's what I mean, like this rule default can talk to every IP address possible in every one of those subnets there. So we are giving it literally the keys to everything. So let's go create this profile here real quick. All right, so to do that, we can do it two ways. We can click on profiles right here, and you can go to IP groups, okay, and create new. Or right from the firewall rules, you can see create an IP group. It's kind of a nice little shortcut. It actually pops it up right here. So we'll just do it this way. All right, so let's go. This is going to be all private IP addresses. Is that what we called it? I want it to match for you guys. Oh, I didn't use the word all. So private IP addresses. All right. This is going to be a IPv4 address subnet, and we are going to type them in here individually. So if you go by, we have 10.0.0.0/8. Add. Then we just need to add another one. So 172.16.0.0/12. Okay. Add. And 192.168.0.0/16. And we say add. And then when we're done, we say create. So now, if we go over into our profiles and IP groups, we have one called private IP addresses, and there's a total of 3. If I click in there, it'll tell me what they are. I can remove one or add one, whatever I need to do from there. Okay, and if I want to remove this profile group, I can go to manage, check the box, and then remove it that way. Okay, just similar to the firewall rules. Okay, so now we can actually create that rule because we've created that IP group. So we're going to create an entry, LAN in. We're going to call this allow default to private IP networks. Allow default, which is the name of our VLAN, to all private IP networks. Is that what we called it? To all, allow default to private IP networks. I like throwing that word all in there. Maybe you guys like it better with the word all. So we're going to allow this. This is going to be an accept rule. All right. This time for source type, if you come over here, source type, it needs to say network. Okay. And then the address is going to be default. So let's see what that looks like. So actually come over here. This is a drop down. We can choose network and then say which network do you want to do it on? Default. So this is our from traffic. This is the source of our traffic. Okay. Now we want it to go to what? We want it to go to destination, should just say port IP group, any port, but the address should be private IP networks that we just created. So let's go over there. So port IP group, port group is any. Let's see what happens. Oh, here we go. Private IP addresses. Boom. So now we're going to allow the default network to talk to all private IP addresses, and we're going to say add rule. Okay, so you can see that's our third rule right there. And if you hover over this little I there, it'll actually show you the IP addresses that you have included in it. It kind of makes it nice for when you're checking your rules. All right, let's get this last rule created. Okay, so this is also going to be a LAN rule. Now this one is the big drop rule. And I'm going to come back to this red area here in just a second. But let's talk through rule 4. So rule 4 is to drop all private IP to private IP traffic. So this rule blocks all other VLANs ever from talking to each other. We are blocking every VLAN, all those private IP addresses from ever talking to each other, okay? Now, when you do a firewall rule, when you are creating firewall rules and your traffic is looking to see if it can go through somewhere or not go through somewhere, the rules are done in order. So, as long as the traffic is coming from default to private, it will allow that. But if it's IoT to another private network, for example, it will not. It will drop it. It'll say, nope, that's a private IP network. That isn't the default, and we drop that traffic. So it's going to drop it. And I'll prove that it works here in just a second. So let's go build it real quick. All right, so we're going to come in here, create entry, LAN in, drop, private, what do we call it? Drop all private IP networks, okay? You can name it whatever you'd like, whatever makes sense to you. Okay, this is going to be a drop rule. All right, and we're going to say port IP group is going to be private IP addresses. Port IP group is going to be private IP addresses. So the source would be any one of those networks, and the destination would be any one of those networks. But we've already let default through. That was rule number 3. So it's going to sneak in there, and then everything else is going to be blocked. And that's how this works. So we'll go ahead and run that rule in there, and you can see right there, block. It's a drop rule from LAN in. Now, let's go check our pinging here, right? So double check IP config. I'm still on 2.14. Let's make sure my phone is still connected to the right one. It looks like it is. So I'm just going to hit the up arrow here. Let's see if we can ping, well, we'll go here, 1.209. Okay, you can see that I can't ping from the IoT network to the default network anymore. I can't do it. It's blocking it. Let's see if we can ping that camera. Okay, so I'll come back over here, show you it's 3.39. Let's try and ping that. So we're going from a restricted network to another restricted network. Okay, so let's ping that guy. And as you can see, it cannot ping either. We are not allowing that to happen. So just to prove that things are working, let's switch over my computer here to the home, my home Wi-Fi, the default network, which supposedly can get to everything, right? That's the whole point of this network. It can get everywhere. And I'm going to switch my phone over to the IoT network real quick so we can go, you know, do a little pinging there. So now if I do IP config, you can see I have a 192.168.1.37 address. Okay, so I'm in the default network. Let's ping 3.39 now. Works just fine. 3.39. I can ping it from the default, but I cannot ping it from the IoT. Let's try pinging the my phone on the 2. network. 2.198, I think is what it chooses. And there it is. 2.198. So this is kind of what I was talking about with the allow, establish, and related. When you ping something like we're doing here, it's an echo. The computer isn't just going and hitting it. That device has to respond back and say, you know, it's like, hey, are you out there 3.39? And 3.39 says, yeah, here I am. I'll send a signal back. So it is a two-way communication, guys. This isn't just me being able to see 3.39. That 3.39 has to be able to ping back, okay? It has to talk back. This is an echo. You're seeing it says reply from, okay? So that's how we know our established and related traffic is working as well, because we are getting a reply back as long as we are in the default network. Now, I'm going to switch back over to IoT here, okay? And I'm going to go to pull up a gateway. Now this time, let's minimize this. If you look in my networks over here, okay, our default network, my default gateway for my default network, remember this is our secure best network ever, is 192.168.1.1, okay? So, just for grins, while being on the IoT network, let's make sure it connected, yep, my IoT Wi-Fi. All right, so let's go to that IP, 192.168.1.1. .1.1. All right, now we are not just going to our own gateway, we are going to the default network's gateway. Every one of your VLANs has its own gateway address. So we're leaving the IoT network to go to the one.network. And as you can see, I can get there. I can access my router, even on another VLAN, from inside a restricted network that I just showed you can't ping back and forth between the VLANs. And that's what I was talking about. These top rules up here are just VLAN to VLAN traffic. Okay? The bottom ones are how we're going to address that. Now, real quick, let's talk about this red section here. Okay? Now, you may have some examples in your network where you need a device to talk back and forth. We had the printer example, right? So maybe you need to be able to print from the IoT network and your printer is in the main network, whatever. I don't, whatever your situation is. The example I have here is you have an IoT camera, right? A wireless smart camera that needs to communicate with a NAS, a network attached storage. Maybe you have a Synology or something, and your Synology is sitting in your secure network. That's where you want it. You want to protect your files. But maybe this IoT smart camera needs to be able to talk to it, okay? So you would create a LAN in rule that would allow that IP address, okay? You go create a port group and put that IP in and let those two IP addresses talk to each other. And I'll do an example of one here shortly. And then you would have to make sure that you park that rule right above rule number 4. It needs to go between 3 and 4, okay? Because if you put it after, this rule will never happen. It has to happen first, okay? That's important. This is a very important parking space, okay? And that's why I put it in here. Location for any special firewall rules. Example, an IoT camera needs to talk to a NAS on the default LAN, okay? So you need to make sure you create your rule, you can get it working, and then you park this rule right before that drop rule, because if you have it below it, it'll get dropped before it ever sees that you've allowed it. And when you're in your rules here, okay, let me get back over there. These kind of just drag and drop. You can move them around. See how I can move these, right? So you just have to make sure that if you create a new rule that allows this special device to talk to this other special device, or maybe this group of devices to talk to this device. Maybe you have a whole bunch of wireless cameras that you need to talk to the NAS. You can go create an IP group, put all your cameras in there, and create an allow rule that allows that to talk to a port group or a port IP address of your NAS. You'd go create one just for your NAS. Just say Synology 192.168.1.250, whatever. And then you create a LAN in rule says allow this group of IP addresses to talk to this single address, the NAS, and you allow that, and then you move it right above rule 4, okay? So like I said, I'll try and throw an example in here before we get done here, but I wanted to point out why this parking space exists for you, okay? All right, so we're gonna keep going, but I wanted to call that out. Okay guys, so hopefully that concept makes sense to you. The orders of the rules matters, and so we've created this little parking space here for any special access that you need in your setup. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. But let's keep things rolling here. So now we're going to talk about the LAN local rules, and these are the ones that control a VLAN's ability to talk to the router itself. We just showed you that we can't talk between the VLANs like we wanted. IoT couldn't ping the camera, it couldn't ping my phone, which is good, but it could get to the gateway, 192.168.1.1, and we don't want that to happen. We don't want it to be able to have access to the router. So we need to create some rules for this, and these are LAN local rules. So one thing you want to be careful of, especially if you're following along in the series, is we don't want to block stuff unnecessarily. We don't want to block things accidentally that we need access to. So let's read through these and I'll explain why I have these rules in here. So rule number 5, allow DNS for the IoT network. This rule allows our IoT VLAN to get DNS information from the router/gateway so it can resolve websites. So what does that mean? It means that my client, this computer that I'm typing on, that you're looking at, it's told when I connect to the network, it says, here's all your information, and by the way, here's your DNS server. Okay, so if we look in here, you can see that my DNS server is 2.1, 192.168.2.1. Okay, so it's chosen, it's been told that the router gateway is where it goes to resolve websites. So basically, my computer needs to get to Netflix.com. It's going to say, excuse me, Mr. Router, how do I get to Netflix.com? I'm told you're my DNS server. And the router gateway is going to go, oh, no problem. That's over here. And it just sends you out that way. So we don't want to block its ability to do that. We don't want to block its ability to ask that specific question. Now there's a part 2 to this. It doesn't just blast out to the router and say, where's Netflix? It actually does it using a specific port. Now you have to think of a port like a door, right? It's going to knock on a specific door, a DNS door. Its DNS is port 53. So it's going to knock on port 53 door, and it's going to open it, and it's going to say, excuse me, router, I need to get to Netflix. Okay, there you go. And then it's going to knock on 53 again. I need to get to Facebook. Okay, yep, it's over here. So it's a very specific port that allows DNS to happen. So we want to leave that open. The goal with that is to allow that to still work, because we need our IoT network to be able to get to the internet. But we don't want to just leave it wide open. So that's why we have the rules that we have. So let's go ahead and create these here. We're going to add rule number 5, and we're going to allow DNS for the IoT network. So if we look through it, you have a LAN local rule. We're going to call it allow IoT to DNS. It's from the IoT network, and is going to be the port group IoT gateway 2.1, and it's going to be a special port that we're going to call DNS. Now these are groups we need to make. So if we go to the top, we have our IoT gateway group right here. You can just see it's 2.1. And we have a DNS, which is a port group. You can see it's different than the other ones. It's port 53. That's that door 53. Excuse me, how do I get to Netflix? So we need to create those real quick, and then we can create our firewall rule. So let's go do that. So we'll go into, we can actually just create it from right from here. So we're going to call this IoT gateway. It is going to be this, and it's just going to have a single IP address in it. Just like that. Doesn't have to be a whole group, can just be one. And then we can choose it from our little drop down. So 192.168.2.1. Okay. Now we need to create a port group for the DNS port for door 53. So we're just going to call this DNS. It is a port group, not this. It is an actual port group. And it's door 53. So we just need to add 53. And we're going to create that. All right, so now we can create our rule. So back to our cheat sheet here. Go back down. Allow IoT to any DNS. Allow the IoT network to get to its own gateway on the DNS port. So let's do that. So we're going to go create an entry. It is a LAN local rule. So that's in our drop down here. You can see not LAN in. We need to go choose a different one. Don't forget to do that. Okay. This is going to be allow IoT to, what do we call this? I already forgot. Allow IoT to any DNS is what I called it. So we'll just keep it that. It's not really to any DNS, it's to its own gateway. To any DNS. That's okay though. All right, except it's going to be a network, the entire IoT network. It's going to be the IoT gateway, and it's going to be specifically, this is new, on VLAN or on port 53 or the DNS. And we're going to allow that. So now we have that rule here, okay? And now we can do the next one where we block it all. So LAN local, drop IoT to all gateways. Great. From the IoT network to another group called all VLAN gateways. So let's go create that real quick. We go up to the top, all VLAN gateways, and we just basically got to put every gateway that we have, that we've made, in there. So let's go do that. Okay, so we'll go into profiles, IP groups, create new. It's going to be all VLAN gateways. It's an IP group, and let's add them in. There we go. And we'll go ahead and say add. Now yours will be, if you're not doing all of them, you just need to put the ones you have in there, but we have 4, so we're going to add all of them. So now we have our group. Let's go create our rule. So we are going to traffic, create an entry, LAN local. These are all going to be LAN locals. We're going to drop IoT to all gateways. Okay, this is a drop rule. It is the IoT network to all VLAN gateways on any port. So we've opened up door 53 over here first. We allow that, and then we drop everything else. So I am on the right one. Yep, IoT. So let's go see if it worked. Netflix.com. There we go. We can get to the web. We asked our router, how do I get to Netflix? And our router told us, it's right over here. We could do that. So let's see if we can get to the router itself. 192.168.1.1. Nope. Exactly what we wanted to do. That's perfect. 192.168.2.1. Nope, can't get there either. Now, that's a good thing. That's a win. Perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. So we have our IoT networks ready to go and working exactly like we want them to, right? Our IoT can basically just get to the web. It can't get anywhere locally. It can't get to any VLANs. And if our default network talks to it, it can talk back. That's exactly what we want. All right, guys. So let's talk about the cameras now. So we want our camera VLAN to function very similarly than we have the IoT network. We don't want it being able to get to these gateways. We don't want someone on the camera network to take over the camera network and be able to go to 192.168.3.1 and get to our gateway. We don't want that. We also don't want them to be able to communicate with any of our other VLANs. Why do they need to? We want to isolate that, kind of put the cameras on their own little island. However, there's some other things we need to take into consideration here because our gateway is doing a lot of functionality, okay? In our case, we have a UDM Pro. And the UDM Pro isn't only our router gateway, it's also our NVR. It's also where we run the Unifi Protect software. It's also where we adopt cameras, where we name cameras. I mean, it's doing more than just allowing my cameras to the internet, and so we have to just open up the one port. So we need to treat our camera firewall rules just a little bit different. And I'm going to skip ahead here, just so you know, but if we set up the rules exactly like we just did, if we just did a mimic of 5 and 6 and put it on 7 and 8, you would immediately see this basement camera right here that's online and working. You'd see it drop off the network. It would just show as offline. It would be grayed out like you couldn't see it. The port would still be hot. You could see that something was still plugged into it, but it wouldn't tell you any information about it. It wouldn't tell you what its name is. It would just show as an offline device. It kicks the camera off. You couldn't access it if you wanted to. And that's because when the cameras are talking to the NVR, they're using other ports. Okay, other than 53, they're using port 4002 and 4 whatever. I mean, there's a whole bunch of ports they use to talk to the gateway so the gateway can be your NVR. So we can't just block them all, and we don't know which ones to open because there's a lot of them. So we need to treat this a little bit differently. So let's go over to the PDF. I'm going to show you what I did. So if we go down to rules 7 and 8, what we're going to do is we're going to drop the cameras, we're going to drop the camera VLAN to all the other gateways. So we're going to drop it to all of them except 192.168.3.1. So we're going to create a group called all VLANs except the camera, or all gateways except camera. Okay? So this is going to block access from it getting to 2.1, 1.1, and 99.1, which is fine. We don't have to get to any of those VLANs to function, okay? So that's rule 7. We're basically blocking it to all other VLANs. Then rule 8 is a little different. We're going to drop camera access to its own gateway, okay? That's 3.1, but only on a couple ports. We're only going to block a couple doors, and they're very specific doors, okay? This rule denies access to be able to log into the router gateway from the camera VLAN. For example, if the camera network if you're on the camera network, you won't be able to go pull up a browser and go to 192.168.3.1 and access the login page. We're going to block the ports that are used to actually access our router, to get that login page. We're going to block those ports, and we're going to leave everything else open. So the NVR and the cameras and all that can function on all the other ports, okay? That's what we're going to do. So that's why this one's a little bit different. So we're going to have to create a couple profiles here. We're going to create one called all gateways except camera, okay? And then we're going to create a camera gateway just by itself, just like we did the IoT gateway up here. And then we're going to create another port group that's going to include HTTP, HTTPS, and SSH. And those are the ways you can access your router. So that's how we're going to do. So these are both going to be drop rules. So let's go see what that looks like here. So we're going to go in here. We're going to go into our settings. I'm going to first show you the groups here. So we're going to create one called all gateways except camera. So it's going to be an IP group. And you can see we're just going to have 1.1, 2.1, and 99.1. We're going to leave 3.1 off. So let's create that one real quick. So we'll go into our profiles IP group. We're going to create, so it's going to be called all gateways except camera. Okay, it's an IP group, and it's going to be 192.168.1.1, 2.168.2.1. Okay, the camera VLAN is VLAN 3, so we want to skip that one, 192.168.99.1. Okay, so we're all gateways except camera. Add that. All right, so that's good. We also need to create a camera gateway. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll go create one here. This is going to be camera gateway. We just want to be able to choose it from our drop down so we can make a rule around it. So we're going to go in here and go 192.168.3.1. All right, so now we have that. Add. So let's go back to our rule number 7 here. So we're going to drop camera to all other gateways, and we're going to use the all other gateway group that we just made. So we're going to go in there and do that. So we'll go into security, traffic rules. We're going to create an entry. It is still a LAN local, right? So this is defining the ability to connect to the router itself. This is drop camera to all other gateways. Okay, you can name that however you like. It is a drop rule. It is from the network camera this time, and it is going to be all gateways except camera. So this will block 2.1, 1.1, and 99.1. We don't care what port. We don't want them talking to any of those other VLAN gateways. We're going to say add rule. You can see that right there. So go back to the cheat sheet here. Whoops. Drop camera access to its own gateway, but only on a couple ports. We need to create this other port group. Now, HTTP's port is 80, HTTPS is 443, and SSH is port 22. So we got to create a port group for that. So we're going to go do that. Port group, and you can call them whatever you want. I'm just going to call them what they are. You could put 80, 443, and 22 in there, or you can call it HTTP, HTTPS, and SSH. That's what we're blocking. These are 3 different ways you can access our router. It is a port group, and we just need to add those ports. 80, 443, and 22. Great. So now we can create our last rule. So we're going to go in there, LAN local. This is drop camera to its gateway. Okay. And I'm going to add a little something here. It's not on my sheet, but ports, on certain ports. It's a drop network camera to its gateway, camera gateway, these ports. There we go. So we have drop camera to its gateway on ports. And you can see that the camera network is basically it can't get to 3.1 on these three specific ports, 80, 443, and 22. So I don't have a way to test this for you because I don't have a camera Wi-Fi network, but I did test it before and it does work. If I go to 192.168.3.1 in a browser while on the camera network, it will not resolve it. But if we go pop over here, you can see my camera is still online. It's trucking, no problem, talking to the gateway, whatever. Okay, so let's talk one more thing in regards to the camera network. Maybe your setup is different. We're talking about, we got a UDM Pro here, and our UDM Pro is serving multiple functions. However, your setup could be different. So let's take the situation where maybe you have a Cloud Gateway Ultra, which is your network controller, and where you go to create your network firewall rules, but your cameras actually record to a Cloud Key Plus, a Cloud Key Gen 2 Plus. So it's a separate device. And let's say they're recording that. That device is the controller for the cameras. It's where the hard drive is where you recorded the cameras, and the cameras are talking directly to that. Well, that's not the same scenario. We have, when your cameras are recording, they're not going to 3.1 because that's the gateway. That's your Cloud Gateway Ultra. That's the router. And we blocked access to the router, but the cameras in this scenario, they're going to the Cloud Key. So if that's the case, your life's actually much simpler. You can actually create the rules the exact same way you did on the IoT network and block access to the router just like you want to, and just make sure that when you plug in your Cloud Key Gen 2, that it's plugged into VLAN 3 on your switch. So it will receive a 192.168.3 network, right? And then all your cameras will be on a 3 network, and they'll just be able to talk to each other because they're on the same VLAN. Because they're in the same bubble, all sitting on the same island, they'll just be able to talk to each other, no problem. They don't have to go through the firewall to do that. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about is if you want to manage your own DNS. All right, so this might not be a lot of you out there. I don't certainly do it in mine. I don't run it that way. But there's a lot of people out there who like to manage their own DNS. They like to have their own little DNS server. A big one is the PiHole, which basically is a little mini DNS server that can run on a Raspberry Pi. And then it basically allows you to control your DNS. You can make it so that certain devices can't get to, bad websites, or you can control what they can get to. Right now, we ask our router and we'll say, hey, how do I get to this bad website? And our router's gonna say, yep, it's over here. And it'll just send you there. There's no restrictions in place, okay? So a PiHole is a good way that you can create restrictions, put kids on safer searching and stuff like that. So since that is an option, and I did promise you to about a little parking space one, let's use a PiHole as our example. So in our example, our PiHole server is gonna be on our default network. We are going to give our PiHole server, because it's a server, we want access, we want to protect our server, we're going to put it in our secure network. So we're going to give it a 192.168.1.250 address, okay? So our little server is going to be 1.250. But we've made it so that IoT network cannot talk to 1. anything, right? We can't get to anything. All we can do is get to the internet. So let's create a firewall rule. Let's put it in that little parking spot that we talked about that will allow the IoT network to talk to our PiHole server. And there's a couple steps we'd have to take. So first thing is we need to go and set our DNS for the IoT network to be the PiHole server. Now, I'm going to move off of the DNS or IoT network to do this because I don't want to break my own access. So let me move over to the home network here real quick, okay? Because this will essentially break the IoT network. All right, so now I'm on the new network. So we're gonna go over into our IoT network, and this is where this is the Wi-Fi, sorry, we need to go into the IoT network, okay? So under networks, IoT network, we're gonna scroll all the way to the bottom to these advanced options, and we're gonna go down to our DNS server, and we're simply gonna uncheck this checkbox. Instead of having it be the router, we're going to go define what we want our network to be, what our DNS server to be, which I've already have it in here, 192.168.1.250. That's a made up device that doesn't exist. So we're just going to say and pretend that that's our PiHole server, and it's going to sit on the default network. So it's going to be plugged into our switch, and it's going to be on VLAN 1, okay? Not VLAN 3, VLAN 1. It's physically connected. All right, so now that we got that, we're going to go ahead and set that. So now our cameras, our IoT network, when they want to get to somewhere, they're going to go to 192.168.1.250 to get there, okay? But now they don't have access. We cannot get to that network, okay? I couldn't ping it. I can't do a ping anyway since it doesn't exist. So we need to go create a rule. And that's where this parking space comes into play here, okay? Right here, we're going to make a rule that basically says allow IoT network devices to talk to 1.250, and we're going to park it right in that red spot there. So let's just go do that real quick, and I'll show you what it's like. So we need to do a couple things. We need to, point our IoT network to use that server. That's part one. We need to create a profile, okay? We're going to create this PiHole server, so we need to create a profile called PiHole server. This is an example. Okay. And this has an IP address of 192.168.1.250. Okay. Looks familiar so far. So we got that. We'll go ahead and add that. Then we need to allow our IoT network to get to it on, that's right, door 53. We're not going to open up the kingdom to it, just port 53. Which we already have. We already have a port 53 profile. So let's go into our security. We'll go over to our rules, and let's go ahead and create a rule here. It is going to be a LAN in rule, not a LAN local. We're accessing a device inside the IoT network, or inside the default network from the IoT network. So we're going VLAN to VLAN here, okay? So it's a LAN in rule. We're going to go IoT, here I want to put example. IoT network to PiHole. I think that's actually spelled like that. Server. Okay. So we're going to accept. We're going to accept from the IoT network. We want all of our devices to be able to get to this server. We need to get it to, scroll down to the PiHole server, which is spelled wrong there. That's okay. I'm not going to fix it. And we need to do it on DNS. So that means that anything on there can get to that server, which is on 1.250, using the door for websites and resolves. So we got that. So you can see it put it in there. However, it is after our drop rule. So we talked about you have to put it between 3 and 4, otherwise it's not going to get into effect. So we need to take this rule and drop it right there. And now it's sitting right here, and anything in that rule, what's going to allow default to everything, it's going to get down, it's going to say, oh, IoT networks can talk to the PiHole server on VLAN on port 53, and then I'm going to drop everything else. So now we've successfully, in this made-up scenario, allowed our IoT network to talk to the PiHole server. If we want our camera network to be able to do the same thing, we have to create a rule for that too. And we put it right after that, right after the rule we just created, right before the drop, but after this one or before this one, whatever. But it also has to go into that parking space, right? So if there's multiple things you need to have special access, they all have to go before that drop rule, okay? That's the important part. So now in our little made-up example, we can actually have our IoT network right here. IoT can get to the PiHole server, which is 1.250 on the DNS port. And that is how you be able to have special DNS and use your firewall rules effectively. Whew, man, we covered a lot. There is a lot of information in there, and I told you this was going to be a longer video, but hopefully what we're doing in there and what we demonstrated and was able to ping and not ping showed you guys what each of those rules are doing. Now again, this is meant to just be a guide. It's not meant to be the end-all be-all. It's a starting point. You may have some things in your network, some special use cases that you're going to have to shake it up a little bit. But this gives you a good starting point. You should be able to mimic some of the rules or tweak them or change them to your needs, and hopefully that you're able to do that. Now, before we wrap things up, I have a couple more tips for you guys that I want to make sure to talk about because they are important to making sure all your devices can communicate in a Unifi network. So let's shoot over to important firewall rule tip number 2. This is for my Sonos audio users, right? So Sonos audio is a really nice product. A lot of you guys build Sonos gear into your home and use it. It's very, very popular. However, Sonos does not play very well with VLANs, unfortunately. So if you have a Sonos audio product in your home or plan to, I know a lot of you are building, I genuinely recommend adding the Sonos equipment to whatever network your phones are going to be on. So in a lot of cases, that's your default network. That's that secure network. Even though I don't see Sonos as secure equipment, from a functionality standpoint, sometimes you have to take it as an acceptable risk. So typically, I will put my Sonos gear on my default network, even though it's not exactly the most secure device. I have to accept that risk. Now, I've seen a lot of Reddit users out there create all these firewall rules that supposedly work with Sonos, and if you want to go that route, you're more than welcome to. But I kind of take the easy road and just said, hey, my network's pretty secure, but when it comes to Sonos, I just want it to work. And so I genuinely recommend putting it on whatever network your phones are going to be on so you can control it. And this also, just a little footnote, this can also apply to other smart devices. Printers, I've even seen some printers not play well with VLANs too. So, again, your setup will really dictate what you need to do or not do. You might have to tweak it to fit your needs. Important firewall rule tip number 3, and this pertains to auto-discovering devices on your IoT network. So Ubiquiti used to call this MDNS. It's even referred to it as that in there, but they've actually changed the name to IoT Auto Discovery, which I think is a much better name. But basically what this is doing, it's using a protocol called multicast DNS that's built in. It's a built-in setting, and it's made to help your IoT devices be discovered when VLANs are in place. So in order to get there, you need to go to your settings, network, multicast settings, and then you need to add whatever VLANs you need to talk to from an IoT standpoint, like which ones need to talk, okay? And what this setting is going to do is when you're on your default network and you're trying to discover IoT devices and have it show up in your phone, this is what's going to help that. So let's go over here. I just want to show you where that's at, and we'll take a look at it. So if we go into my home network, or no, we're going to go into networks, okay? And this is right on the main page of networks. So I don't have to go into any of my VLANs. It's actually right here in the multicast settings, IoT Auto Discovery. And you can see mine has the default network, which is where my phone would be, and my IoT network, where I would be doing the auto discovery thing. And if we highlight this, it says it forwards multicast traffic between the selected networks so that IoT devices can be discovered and communicate with each other when connected over different networks or VLANs. So it's really designed to help enhance your IoT experience on a Unifi network, okay? These devices can talk and be discovered and auto-discovered in a lot of different ways. Some of them are using IP, some of them are using multicast. So this is a setting that I think you guys need to look at, make sure you have set correctly in order to communicate properly with your IoT devices. It's kind of like that little ace in the hole that opens the door and lets these guys talk back and forth. Okay? So that is tip number 3 for setting up VLAN and firewall rules in your network. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up video number 6, and really it's going to wrap up all of the network portion of this video series. If you're interested in Unifi cameras and Unifi Protect, I do encourage you to press on and watch videos 7 and 8, but those videos are going to be 100% dedicated to the camera stuff, and everything that we build in there and do in there will be affected by the rules that we created in this section. So it all connects together. But if you guys are just doing the network, I hope you guys found it helpful. Please leave comments. I do my best to try and get in and answer people's questions when I can if something was confusing. Use the documentation that's provided. That's what it's there for, and hopefully it'll help you guys with your network journey. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you guys down the road in a future video.